What's up, everybody? Welcome into a recorded edition
Mm,
of SSPN Offseason, Ethan. I was thinking about this. Obviously, we did have the Victor Wembanyama news that
mhm,
dominated the offseason last year, but there were so many more SSPN offseason episodes, whether it was breaking down the team, previewing guys, maybe we talked a little Summer League here and there. But I feel like we did these much more last offseason in comparison to this year. And obviously, the Spurs had two top 10 picks, even though we didn't use them both. So it was a little bit of different circumstances on top of Summer League following the draft right after that. And then, of course, we have the Olympics coming up. So there have just
mhm.
been a ton more topics to talk about, as well as Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes. I can't even forget that.
Right.
So obviously, that kind of gives the space for the lives, you
Mm,
know, where we've got that much to talk about. But this week, Ethan, there's really not too much going on in the Spurs world, but there is one big topic that we could have discussed on some of those other lives that I just alluded to, but we kind of felt like there was some more concrete, important stuff going on. But here we are, Ethan, back with SSPN offseason to
mm.
talk about the Lauri Markkanen trade rumors. We've been hearing it in the comments. I've kind of alluded to it a little bit when we've talked on the lives, but again, we just had some more important stuff to get to. But that has definitely been the talk of the week for Spurs fans before we get into the Olympics this weekend. So I'll just jump right into it, Ethan. What are your thoughts on this whole Lauri Markkanen saga that feels like it's been going on for a month now? And then, of course, the recent news that came out earlier this week from Evan Sideri of Forbes Sports, who said that the Spurs are willing to trade Keldon Johnson and multiple picks for Lauri Markkanen.
I feel like I gotta protect my six here and make sure I come at this at all the correct angles, Jude, just so no one gets mad at me in the comments section. So let me preface everything with this. I think Lauri Markkanen is a phenomenal player. I think just black and white, looking at it objectively, he fits next to Wemby. He fits next to Devin Vassell. He can space the floor. He can create his own shot. He has shown the ability to play with ball dominant players in Cleveland. He also has shown that he can be the primary scorer like he has in Utah, and he had his all-star season last year. So with all that being said, I think that these trade rumors, who is the GM for the Utah Jazz?
Danny
Danny
Ainge.
Ainge. Yes, thank you. Danny Ainge, who is known for doing two things. One, collecting picks, and that's how the current Boston Celtics super team was built, by trading away Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce to acquire all of those picks. Or not Ray Allen, Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett to acquire all those picks to rebuild, and or making huge big splash trades, i.e. acquiring Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett initially to win the championship in 2008. So he's about the big splash, right? And so when you have a guy like Lauri Markkanen, who is so sought after and well regarded and fits in pretty much every system, checks all the boxes, of course he's gonna, kind of hold him out in front of everybody and wave him around just to see how many first round picks basically he can get out of a team. I think is really what he's trying to do. Now, if he starts the season with Lauri Markkanen on the roster, I don't think he's gonna be mad. I think he will. He's totally the guy to just sit on his hands and be like, all right, we're going into the season with Lauri Markkanen and we're not going to trade him, because he's looking for that big splash. And what I mean by big splash, I'm saying 5 or 6 first round picks, a majority of them being unprotected. And can the Spurs do that? Technically, yes. Now, am I a fan of making that move? Not really, for 5 or 6 first round picks, Jude. I'm fine with including Keldon Johnson. And that's one aspect of this I haven't touched on yet. As far as our young core, he's the only guy that I'm really willing to include in a deal right now. I don't want to include Devin, don't want to include Jeremy. Stefan, we just acquired, obviously not Victor, right? So it's really Keldon, Malachi, Blake are like the three young players that we're willing to make a move with, right? So he's probably the most valuable of those three. Don't have a problem with that. But if we're gonna give up 5 or 6 first round picks and really, and acquire Lauri Markkanen, a guy who's already making so much money, a guy we're going to have to extend and pay even more money, and our future is mortgaged at that point, right? Because we're no longer going to get quality players on cheap contracts that are rookies to kind of fill in the gaps. So we're going to have to depend heavily on the free agency market in the next couple of years to stay competitive with veteran minimum players to stay under the salary cap. And personally, I'm just not a fan of that. If we can get them for 3, even 4 first round picks, all in. But as soon as we get to 5 or 6, which I think is what it's going to cost, knowing Danny Ainge, I think I just take a step backwards. But with all that being said, Jude, I don't think anybody's going to offer Danny Ainge 5 or 6 first round picks. So we have the time to be patient here and maybe get him down the road.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you just said, I think are great points. I'll touch on a little bit of that here in a second. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about is just to mention, to give some context. I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this already know this, but it seems like the main other suitor potentially for Lauri Markkanen would be the Golden State Warriors. There's been Brandon Podziemski and Moses Moody have been
Mhm.
involved in a lot of the potential trade packages that have reportedly been offered. Who knows how true all of this stuff is? I think we know one thing for sure is that Lauri Markkanen's on the trade block, and the Warriors and the Spurs are probably the teams that are both the most active. But throughout this process, Ethan, too, we've heard some rumors about the Kings, I believe.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of other teams involved, but still, the Warriors and the Spurs have kind of been the two mainstays. But really, the Warriors have kind of had the most smoke. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't think that they have the same pick assets that the Spurs do. So I think that's why a lot of Spurs fans are so enamored with this. And admittedly, myself, this was like a couple months back or so, and I totally, just dismissed it as like, oh, that's never going to happen because we kind of like to try to stick to the ground and stick to reality here, Ethan. But, I think I forget when it was, but like I said, at some point this offseason, since the season ended, I just mentioned like, if I could just go pluck a player out of the league, to bring on the Spurs, Lauri is the one that stands out to me. Obviously, there are better players than Lauri Markkanen, but the prospect of pairing Victor Wembanyama and Lauri Markkanen together in the
Mm.
new age of basketball with two 7-footers who can shoot the three, put the ball on the floor, and just be that future twin towers, if you will. On top of Lauri's European connections as well, that would fit
Mhm.
in San Antonio also. Um, with all of that being said, and as much as I'd love it, and I think it's, what I mean, like to think about that, those two on the floor together, where we're only giving up a Keldon Johnson or a Malachi Branham, that definitely excites me.
Mhm.
With all of that being said, this is the beginning of Victor's, ascent, I guess you could say. And the Spurs have a lot of time to play this out in this 2025 draft class. Everybody's
Mhm.
talking about it as, one of the best in the past decade and since 2000 even. Kind of the opposite of this 2024 class. So and I think you and I, and obviously we'll have to see how the season plays out, but I think we're still going to be very happy with Stephon Castle,
Mhm.
even with this draft being a little bit more of a down year. So when you think about how we're adding him and how excited we are about him, again, obviously the season's got to play out, but still, I mean, think about how excited we would be for adding, players in next year's draft. You know what I
Oh
mean? When
yeah.
you think about the excitement we had this year, and, these classes are supposed to be, almost opposite in the sense of where they fall on like the totem pole in, the last 20 years or so, if that makes sense. But going back to what you were saying about, just your personal opinion on the whole situation, I definitely have my limits too. I don't want to give up too many assets when there may be an even better trade down the road. And I mean, think about it. As the Spurs get better and Victor gets better, we're going to become more and more attractive. We'll see when that new stadium gets built. That's probably going to be closer to the end of this decade if that does happen. But the Spurs are only going to get more and more attractive again. So do you really want to just flush out your entire future at this point of Victor's career? I mean, maybe they are like, we're willing to give up 4 first round picks. And the thing is, with all of the picks that we've stacked on, Ethan, like if we're going to send multiple of other teams' picks, in a certain year, or one of our picks and another one, like I think next year we technically have 3 first round picks. I think one of them's protected. I believe that's the Chicago pick, which is top 10. And y'all can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm kind of just going off memory there. But with all of that being said, like, maybe there is a scenario where the Spurs can make this move and still have a first round pick every year, whether it's theirs or not, because of just how many picks we've
True.
traded for. Like, that's really attractive to me. But
Mhm.
also, I don't want to just make a move just to make a move because we can make a move, to get Lauri Markkanen right now, because we're going to have to give him a giant extension. I mean, we just gave Devin an extension. Victor's extension will be the biggest in NBA history whenever that happens. That's another thing we've got to continue to keep in mind. Jeremy Sohan is going to get a contract. I mean, you know what I mean? There's if
Yeah.
we really want to build this young core moving forward and we believe in some of these guys, you know, do we want to trade all those picks and some of these dudes and then have more of a cap strain, and have to like not re-sign Jeremy, because when you
Yeah.
think about it, if we were to trade for Lauri Markkanen, we'd probably be able to play out the rest of Jeremy's contract. And maybe even if we were able to re-sign him, like, are we going to be able to re-sign him when Victor's contract comes on the books? Or will we have to make moves with some of those guys if we do that? I know this is getting really in the weeds, but the other thing is also, it's like maybe bringing him in means we can't re-sign him. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of people right now might be like, well, Lauri Markkanen and Jeremy Sohan, this is a no-brainer. Yes, but also Jeremy Sohan's 20 years old. And Lauri Markkanen is a great example of a player who took a little bit to fully develop into the player that he was, you know? So yeah, I know that's a lot that I just threw at you there,
Mm-mm.
Ethan, but there's a lot of variables here. I guess I would say, I kind of, not to just agree with you on everything, but if there's a scenario where we can trade 3 to 4 picks while managing to keep a first round pick in every single, draft moving forward, or maybe there's one that we just don't have a first round pick, but the majority, you know what I mean, moving forward, we have those, we have a pick in the first round with some sort of package of a Keldon Johnson or a Malachi Branham, as much as we love our boy KJ. Um, at that point, to me, that would be a little bit of a no brainer. And the rumors that I've seen of like just Keldon and a couple picks, like that, also to me would be a no brainer. And again, we've talked about this so much, Ethan, about how we're not as down on Keldon as maybe some other Spurs fans. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're comparing him to Lauri Markkanen,
Right.
it's pretty obvious there who you would rather have at this point.
For sure. And if it was that Keldon, 2 to 3, maybe even 4 first round picks, I probably would do it, especially if we don't have to give up Malachi Branham, because he's immediately an improvement there. Now we probably immediately become a playoff team, if I'm being honest with you. Like right now, I think we're both in agreement that we're probably fringe play-in with our current roster as constructed. If tomorrow we were able to swap Keldon for Lauri Markkanen, we're a playoff team for sure. So that's the benefit of him, and I
Right.
completely understand that. But also, his contract is expiring. He will be an unrestricted free agent after this season. Um, so I understand Utah wanting to trade him because this is a loaded draft class, like you said. So they want to kind of tank in this year.
Can I
Go
jump
ahead.
in?
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you.
You're
But
fine.
the other thing that I've been seeing just kind of regarding this is that I think whoever Laurie gets traded to, he wants to sign an extension with them like right then and there, basically. Like I think that might even be like one of the things with Utah and him, like, okay, if you trade me, you need to trade me to a team that's going to give me an extension I want.
Mm. I would probably extend him. I mean, right now he's on like a really friendly contract, but he's gonna want the works. And quite honestly, he deserves the works. But to your point, are we going to be able to pay everybody down the line? That's where we aren't qualified enough to really talk about that in full detail. Like I'm sure the Spurs front office has given this a lot of thought, but if I'm the Warriors, just to touch on your point, I don't think you can get a deal done unless you include what's his name,
Kuminga.
Kuminga. Yeah, if I'm Utah, I don't even pick up the phone unless you're willing to include Kuminga in that deal, and pretty much every draft pick you have as well.
On top of probably Podzimski at least too.
Pajimski as well. Yeah. Moses Moody you can keep. I like Moses Moody, but
Right.
like if that's what it comes down to, if it's two of those guys, you're keeping Moses. I'm taking Pajemski and Kaminga.
Yeah, if I'm the Jazz, I think I would probably want at least Kuminga and B Pods.
Hmm. And
Not to
saying
say
that,
that I go ahead.
sorry, it's saying that I would take that over Keldon and 3 firsts any day of the week if I'm Utah personally.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on how they value the draft picks, because if we're willing to dangle one of ours from next year, you know what
Mm,
I'm saying?
or Atlanta's.
On top of some future ones. Right, exactly. And there's a lot of Spurs fans who don't want to trade that, Atlanta pick specifically.
Dude,
What's up?
what if no, actually never mind, this wouldn't work. I was gonna say, what if we like traded Atlanta's picks to somebody who then took Atlanta's picks and gave them back to Atlanta for Trae Young? Like, what if that was a deal, like a 3-team deal, and that's how we ended up getting Lauri Markkanen? That'd be kind of crazy.
That would be kind of crazy. I didn't even think about that. That would be probably unlikely, but still
Extremely
that
unlikely. Yeah, it's
but
not
that
happening.
would but that would be crazy, and I'm sure Atlanta wouldn't be necessarily opposed to that.
Not at
Um,
all.
well, I guess they're trying to build around Trey. They kind of chose him over DeJounte, but considering the 2025 draft, and if they did that, they would be in full tank for flag mode. Maybe they would be down. Um, but with all of that being said, Ethan, any final thoughts on just this Lauri Markkanen trade scenario and kind of everything that we talked about?
I'd say on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being it's happening, 1 being it's not happening, this is probably like at a 2 or 3.
I might give it a little bit more, but the max I was going to go was 4.
Mm.
So it's
Let's
not
go
like
with that.
that's much different. Well, I was going to say like 3, 4. You know what I mean? So we basically had the same thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of any other final thoughts I can kind of have on this topic, but I think at the end of the day, um, going back to Danny Ainge, and I think Laurie has even said that he would be willing to stay in Utah. He likes Utah, but the franchise is kind of just moving in a different direction. And if they could get a big Danny Ainge type move, that could set them up for the future, just like the Spurs have been doing and just like the Thunder did,
Mhm.
under Sam Presti. And with that being said, Laurie is also, I believe he's 27 now. So, he is a little bit on a different timeline, than the rest of this Jazz roster as of right now. Obviously, you've got some veteran guys in there like a Jordan Clarkson and stuff like that. But really, for the most part, it's a very young team. And they're obviously, with this whole situation, trying to move into a more rebuilding era and doing exactly what I just said, following in the footsteps of the Thunder and trying to recreate what he did with Boston as well. Um, but again, it's just got to be the right move for the Spurs, I think is what I think at the end of the day. And I don't think again also, I think that Danny Ainge is trying to get a deal that he feels like, obviously every team wants to make a trade where they feel like they got the better end, but he's trying to swindle somebody. I wish I had a better adjective there, Ethan, but he's trying to get somebody to overpay with picks for
Yes.
Lauri Markkanen. And that's not to put down on Lauri Markkanen, because we talked about, he's an awesome player. I think
Mhm.
in a different situation, he's an all-star level player. Um, but with
That's
all
what
of
Danny
that being
does.
said, the Spurs don't need to fall into that with the upcoming drafts, how they have everything set up, and also the future with Victor. Like, because if you think about, again, and I know I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but I'll wrap it up with this. If you think about the Spurs in 2 years, and say we just keep stacking assets and we get, this year we do end up getting in the play in, right? And then
Mhm.
next year we're a playoff team. And even if we lose in the first round, let's say we make some noise, 6, 7 game series, something like that. How much more attractive and how much easier and how much more leverage are the Spurs going to have in that situation? A lot more. It's like I know Wemby's not going to play as long as other players, but we don't have to rush it that fast. I think that's kind of my final synopsis on this whole situation.
I would concur with everything that you said, Jude.
Well, I appreciate that, Ethan. And we appreciate you guys for checking out this episode of SSPN Offseason. Tell us your thoughts on the Lauri Markkanen situation in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the content today, don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button. We truly appreciate you guys. We also got some more merch sales recently, so we truly appreciate that. If you want to check that out, you can go to sspn.myspreadshop.com or scan the QR code right here. And also, if you want to stay updated with everything, you can follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all on the next one.